Welcome back to the Hot Shop. My name is Davin. I'm a glass blower. Today, for the little project, we're going to be making a set of double old-fashioned or rocks glasses. These are kind of interesting shape to make freehand in a hot shop because you got to know how to make a really thick base and keep a really thin rim or get a really thin rim. And we're also going to be making them to a specific set of dimensions so they hold a big cube or a big sphere of ice inside of them. And as nice as these are, and I do like them, they're lovely to drink out of, we're going to take it up a notch in part 2 of this video, which will come out in a while. So like and subscribe, stick around, hit that notification bell, and you'll know when that video comes out and you'll see what that is. I think you'll like it. Anyway, cheers. Let's go get some hot glass.
So here we go, getting a gather of glass. As always, that's how we begin. This project, very much like the last one we did, the bowl, is going to begin with a starter bubble, which is basically a gather of glass that I put a bubble into. I let it get cold and then I gather on top of it. Now, one of the things that I like to think about in terms of fundamentals here is that when I'm gathering glass, whether it's a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever gather, I'm not just gathering material, I'm gathering heat. And depending on how I've shaped my previous gather and how cold I've let it get, that means I can kind of control where I distribute heat with that next gather. So if you take a look here, if you were to pause this, you would see a thick tip and thin sides with sort of a little waist in the middle. That waist is going to collect a lot of hot glass. That tip is going to get cold and act like a heat sink and suck heat out of the tip of the next gather. But the sides, being very thin, are going to heat up really quickly with the next gather. And so what you'll see if you watch really closely when I start blowing, what you'll see is that the bubble, instead of pushing down to the tip, pushes out sideways. So this is sort of my little trick when I'm making rocks glasses like this, or any kind of glass where I want a really thick base. This is my little trick for keeping the base of the piece, what's going to be the foot, really thick and really thinning out those sides and the rim. So you'll see here, I'll be using my foot pedal here in a second, and I'm going to do this thing where I kind of drop it out, so you can sort of see that the tip of that is really cold, and there's hot glass around the sides. As I'm dropping it, which is allowing it to stretch a little bit, I'm chilling the base with the back of my jacks, which is helping. But watch that bubble, look at it. Look, it's going sideways, and how thick the base has stayed there. Now I could keep the base as thick as I want here by just stopping, letting it get cold again, then heating it up, and then those sides would heat up much quicker than that thick, cold base. And then when I blew, the sides will blow out even more. I'm going for sort of just a standard double old-fashioned rocks glass kind of base, so I don't want it to be that thick. I want it to be just sort of thick enough that I can, do what I need to do with part 2 of this project, which I'm pretty excited about showing you all. So going back in and getting some heat here, I'm all the way inside the reheating chamber. Even though I was plenty hot, I think one of the differences between experienced glass blowers and beginners is that experienced glass blowers go back in and reheat when the glass stops moving easily, so they don't have to heat as long. We might heat more often, but we don't have to heat as long. So again, chilling the bottom, blowing out. You see the bubbles blowing sideways because again, that thin glass on the sides heats up faster. Also, if it's thinner, it's going to stretch easier, it's going to blow out easier. So that's the other thing in thinking about fundamentals that dictates where the bubble is going to go. Thin glass stretches easier than thick glass. It's just like a rubber band. A thick rubber band is harder to stretch than a thin rubber band. As always, got to cut in a nice jackline or constriction. That's where the piece is going to be broken away from the blowpipe. There is not really a good excuse to not have a nice, narrow, crisp, well-formed constriction. There's just no reason. It's gonna going to make your life a lot easier if you're blowing glass if you learn to put in a nice tight neckline like that, because it means that you can use a more delicate punty, because the punty will live through breaking it off, because it's very easy to break off something with a narrow jack line. It's just better. It just makes it easier. Also, when you have a small opening like that, when you go to reopen it, it'll stretch out a lot thinner. It's just better. So anyway, what you saw there was I was just heating the very tip, just the very tip of the base. So what I'm trying to do here is make a nice crisp edge between the bottom and those side walls. I want it to be not sort of rounded, but very sort of sharp and flat. So I'm just heating that face. So when I'm in the reheating chamber, in the hole, I'm not actually even in it. I'm just sort of touching that wall of heat right up against the door, but I'm not inside of it. So just to be clear, it's the difference in temperature between the hot face of the bottom and the cold sides of this object that allowed me to push very hard and get a nice crisp edge here. So you can see right there, I'm pushing back toward the blowpipe very hard right now, and the cold sides keep the bottom from mushrooming out. Constant turning to keep it on center so it's even pressure, and then check my size. Like I said, we're going for specific dimensions because I'm making a set of these, and I also want them to hold a certain amount of liquid with one of those big ice cubes or ice spheres inside of it. If I was to make this piece too big and I put one of those cubes in there and I did a standard old-fashioned or something, it would just not see how crisp that edge is getting, by the way, where the sides meet the bottom. That's what we're going for. If I made this piece, this object too large, and I put that cube in there when I poured my beverage, it wouldn't even cover the cube. You know, it would just look like the cup's too big. And I don't know, there's something about the aesthetic of a nicely made drink that I think your glass that you're using has a lot to do with. So again, checking my dimensions. I'll use the Soffietta here to chill just the tip of the base where I'm going to stick the punty. Remember, that's a lot of thick, hot glass that I've just been heating for the last little while. I don't want to stick a punty on it and have it weld on and be difficult to remove. Even though at some point during this project I intend to remove that punty mark, I still don't want to leave a big chunk on the bottom there. So standard punty, just like I always make, nothing fancy here. You'll see I just give it a little quick thing there just to kind of point it up slightly, stick it up. I'm not pushing too hard, and I'm using the time wisely so that I'm chilling the neck while I'm centering the punty. So standard procedure here. I take a long heat. You don't really see me take that heat, but it's about 10 to 15 seconds. Right after I punty it, gets everything hot. I go all the way inside, and then I use that moment when the punty is still moving to be able to center it. Now this move doesn't work if your punty is stone cold. So I'm used to breaking my pieces off onto a very hot punty, which is one of the reasons why my pieces don't break off of both the punty and the jack line when I'm puntying it. Because the punty's hot and juicy and moving. If I was to wait too long, it's conceivable that the way I break these off, they could fall off of everything and fall on the floor and die, but they don't. So you can tell that the tweezers are slipping a little bit there. I just kept at it until the heat of the glass kind of burnt off the wax. If you look real close, you could actually see a little steam coming off the tip of those tweezers, and that was from some wax that was on the bench getting on to the tips. That's why I always put those tweezers with the tips sitting off the bench. You'll see how much better they grip this time. Look at that, I can just pull that right out. Always coming back to checking that base. That's what's going to keep everything straight and keep me centered. Checking my size. So what I'm doing there is I'm checking where I know the height is going to be, and you'll see here that I put a little constriction at an angle in that glass. Now what that's going to do is it's going to make it so that the next time that I pull it out, the opening is going to be quite small. If I was to just tweezer it out at that size, it would make a quite large opening. So I'm constricting it down so that when I pull it out, and you'll see here, it pulls out, but it stays that really narrow, opening, and that is going to make it so that when I open it, I'm opening it from a really tiny opening. It's really going to stretch out that glass and thin that rim and make a nice, thin, crispy rim with a really good sort of mouth feel, you know, when you sip from it. Use the edge of the bench, just bonk it off. Of course, you could have your assistant do that, either way. So I'm just prepping this shape so that when I go and I use my Soffietta, checking my size again, so that when I go and I use my Soffietta, it's in the right shape to blow up. So you'll see here how that works. Blowing quite hard. And I actually should stop right there, but I keep going a little bit too much. See that? That's a little overblown there. That means I'm gonna have to try to fix it. And you can see I try there, but it's too cold. And I'm probably gonna fix it when I sit down. That's probably gonna make this object slightly, maybe a 1/16, 1/8 inch taller than I really want it. If I had stopped when it was straight sides, I could have saved myself this move right here, and that would have been better. So you see how much that rim stretches. We're really close. We're really close to the height that I want there, in the ballpark of it anyway. Again, letting the blades open. I open down. That's just how I'm comfortable. Doesn't really matter. These reheats here are fairly short because I don't want to overheat that rim, that thin rim, and have it beat up and become really fat, which is what would happen if I kept sort of messing with it and kept heating it for too long. That glass does not want to be a 1/16 of an inch or 3/32 thick at all. It wants to be a 1/4 inch, so it's just going to keep balling up. So make sure everything's straight. And if I've done everything right, just a couple of slight taps. Again, I like to do a lot of small taps. It starts the cracking process. And there you go. It releases. Again, I'll point out that I'm using cold, non-preheated tongs to pick up this quite thin glass, and walk over to the annealer. And those cold tongs, they're covered in Kevlar, but those cold tongs do not crack the glass. So it's demonstrable that you don't need to preheat your gloves before you touch something. You won't crack it. You're just burning up your gloves. So like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you are notified when part 2 of this comes out and you see what we do with these with this set of rocks glasses. Cheers.